Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to go over dating in Sunhaven. How do you get to the first date? How do you get to the second date? Does it matter how many hearts you have? The answer, TLDR, is no. So let's take an example, okay? Let's look at this diagram right here. Every romanceable has many conversations, right? All of these conversations that you can have with them. They have the ones you always get, the ones you get while dating, and the ones you get while you're not dating. So you are 100% of the time going to have these 6 conversations. You are only going to have these conversations if you are dating. And if you are not dating at this point, then you are going to have these conversations. But paint, please. And the way dates work is they are tied to one of these conversations. So an NPC might have date 1 here. This might be date 1. Date 1, right? And they might have date 2 here. So imagine this is date 2. This means that you can get date 1 without dating them, without giving them the love letter or clicking the heart on their dialogue box. For what it's worth, I would recommend using the heart on the dialogue box. 1, you don't spend community tokens, and 2, on the newer rNPCs, at the time I'm recording this, the love letter is bugged. So the love letter does not work on Wesley, Kai, or Vivi right now. So I would recommend just using the heart next to their dialogue box if you haven't done that before. That's the easiest way to ask them to date you. You just have to be at 10 hearts, right? So in this scenario, you would be able to get date 1, and you would have to ask them to date you here, 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 to go on to these conversations and get to date 2. The caveat is you could instead get through all of this. You could go on date 1, you could have a great time, you could keep talking to them, you could talk to them here, you could talk to them here, and say you get here and you're like, now I'm going to give you the heart. Then, instead of going on to these ones, you now go shoop over to conversation 7, and then you can get to date 2. So, if you find you're having trouble getting dates with the character, definitely get them to 10 hearts and begin dating them. Because these conversations always happen, so even if you're here and you click the heart in their dialogue box and you're like, hey, would you like to date? They're like, yeah, I'd love to date. Then your path is now like this, right? You're still gonna get all of the dialogues and you'd still get the date if the date was here, if the date was here, if the date was here, it doesn't matter, you'd still get it, right? So when in doubt, just try to get to 10 hearts and date them as much as possible. The hearts do matter in that you have to be at 10 hearts to get them to date you. However, the hearts do not matter in that it doesn't matter how many hearts you have when you're here. As long as you get here, you can go on the date, right? The other thing that's tied to conversations is the keepsake. So the keepsake might be here. Looks so bad. Keepsake might be here. And so that's how you get the keepsake. It's also tied to conversations. With some of the newer NPCs, the issue is that date 1 doesn't happen until here. This is date 1. Date 1. So you're going through all of this as you do with all of the other NPCs, and you're like, they're not asking me to date. And so you keep going through here, and you're like, they haven't asked me to date. That's so weird. When will they ask me to date? And the answer is they won't, because you have to heart them, you have to date them, and then you can move on to the conversation up here. So a lot of the older NPCs have their dates earlier because there was a mechanic early on where during the second date you would start dating. That is no longer the case. That is outdated, right? So let's look at June, for example. So June has all of these cycles: strangers, friends, dating, and then a couple when you're married, right? And if you look, cycle 5 is June Hangout 1, okay? That is before you start dating. Okay, cycle 7 is June Hangout 2. That one is also before you start dating. So you could go on both dates with June and then go on to be, in his friend cycles, and it's fine. But a lot of characters have their Hangout 2 during these dating cycles. And the newer characters have Hangout 1 in these dating cycles. So that's why it's very confusing, because the game does not give you any indicator of where you are in these cycles, right? You only have hearts to go off of. So it makes sense that people are like, oh, at 4 hearts I started dating June, and so his date 1 happens at 4 hearts and his date 2 happens at 6 hearts. That's just not how it works. But I could see that because hearts are the only indicator you have that your relationship is progressing with a character. And the dialogue cycles, the conversations, which actually matter for getting dates, you have no indicator in-game as to whether that is happening or not. You are just kind of continuing to talk to them and hoping that you're progressing enough to get there soon, right? So it definitely is hard to know when you're going to get these dates. The wiki should have them, some of the newer characters don't, but also then you're kind of at a point where you're like, great, now I have to look at spoilers to see when to get the date, right? Which kind of sucks. The other thing to know is that you have to get through all of the dating cycles before you can marry them, which is why a lot of times you go to propose to them and the game is like, oh, sorry, you have to be at 15 hearts and progress enough in dialogue. It's because you need to get through all of these cycles before you can give them the ring and they'll accept it. So that is the tricky part with dating, is you either have to spoil yourself and look at the cycles, or you have to just kind of wait it out and hope that you're getting enough conversations to do the things you want to do with the character you want to do. So my recommendation is always just to start dating them as soon as you can, because even if you date them here, you're still gonna get this, right? And even if you go through all this, and then you get through this, and then you start dating, you're still gonna get all the dates, right? So the best thing you can do is just to go talk to them as much as possible and get to 10 hearts and ask them to date you as much as possible, because that's all the hearts are useful for, is to set a milestone in your relationship. The hearts are for milestones. The conversations are for quests and keepsakes. And I've seen so many people confused about this, rightfully so, but that's how you get to all the dates. And then don't forget there's a third hangout, a third date. Once you get to 15 hearts, you can go to their house after they've gone home for the night, which is usually like 10:30, and then you can get a third date. And you can get the third date after you're married and all of that. So the only other thing that I don't know about is that you always get a gift in the mail and you always get a record in the mail. And I do not know exactly what those are tied to. If they are tied to conversations or if they are tied to hearts. I would have to guess that they are tied to conversations like everything else is in this game, but it's very possible that that's based off of something that I don't understand. There's a lot of inner workings in this game that are not clearly specified in the game, so it's kind of up to us to trial and error and decode like what exactly is going on. But I hope this is really helpful for you if you're ever in a situation where you feel like you can't get a date, especially with Wesley. Wesley's first date is like here. So it definitely takes a lot of work to get Wesley to date you, which is fair. That's part of his personality. I think the reason why the newer NPCs have their dates later is because, for example, Wesley is meant to kind of hate you for a while. And so you kind of have to build up trust with him, right? You have to talk to him enough and become friends strongly enough that he sees you as someone that he can ask to hang out with. Versus like some of the older rNPCs just weren't written that way. They were written more flirty, and they weren't like developing characters so much. They were just kind of like a character that you could see versus the newer ones, which are trying to take you down a storyline. They're trying to have a little progression with you, so you have to kind of create the exposition for that progression before you can go on the dates. So it's meant to be more of a storyline than just a like just hanging out with the character. So that's why some of the newer NPCs have their dates so much later, is because they're trying to build up the plot, right? But yes, that is all I have to explain on this. Hopefully this is helpful. I hope you have a great rest of your morning, day, evening, whatever it is you're having. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being here. Bye, everyone.